My name is Emma Rodriguez, and 3 weeks before my wedding, I came home to find my mother and stepfather throwing my grandmother's vintage wedding dress into a dumpster, calling it moth-eaten trash that would embarrass our family. When I screamed that it was the only thing I had left of Grandma Rose, my mother just shrugged and said I needed to grow up and stop living in fantasies. I thought I'd lost the most precious thing in my life forever. But then an elderly seamstress showed up at my door 2 days later, holding something wrapped in delicate tissue paper, saying she couldn't bear to see such a beautiful piece of history destroyed. What she handed me that day and what we discovered hidden inside that dress changed everything I thought I knew about my grandmother, my mother's bitter resentment, and the family secrets that had been stitched away for over 50 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun was streaming through my apartment windows in Phoenix when I got the call that would shatter my wedding plans. It was my best friend Jess, her voice tight with panic. "Emma, you need to get to your mom's house, now. They're cleaning out the garage, and I just drove by." Her voice broke. "I think I saw your dress in the dumpster." My heart stopped. "What dress?" "Your grandmother's dress, the one you've been planning to wear." "Emma, I think they threw it away." I don't remember the drive to my mother's house in Scottsdale. One moment I was standing in my kitchen in my pajamas. The next I was pulling into the driveway where my stepfather, Rick, had systematically erased every trace of my grandmother's memory over the past 15 years. The green dumpster sat in the driveway like a monument to destruction. I ran to it and looked inside. There, crumpled at the bottom like discarded tissue paper, was a flash of ivory silk and antique lace. No, I whispered, climbing into the dumpster, not caring about the smell or the stains. I pulled out what remained of Grandma Rose's 1952 wedding dress. The silk was torn in 3 places, the delicate hand-sewn beadwork was scattered, and the hem was stained with coffee grounds. "Emma, what the hell are you doing?" I looked up to see my mother, Diane, standing in the garage doorway with her arms crossed. She'd changed everything about herself over the years to match Rick's preferences, erasing the woman who used to tell me stories about Grandma Rose's adventures. "How could you?" I climbed out, clutching the ruined dress to my chest. "This was Grandma's wedding dress. I told you I wanted to wear it." Mom rolled her eyes. "Emma, you're 28 years old. That thing is 70 years old and falling apart. It smells like mothballs, and it's 2 sizes too small. Michael deserves a bride who looks like she belongs in this century." It could have been altered. It could have been cleaned. It was all I had left of her. It was junk taking up space, Rick's voice boomed from behind her. He appeared with a beer already in hand, despite it being 10 in the morning. "Your grandmother's been dead for 8 years, kid. Time to let go of the past." I felt something break inside me. "She raised me when you were too busy building your new perfect life to care. This dress was supposed to connect me to her on my wedding day." "Connect you to a woman who filled your head with fairy tales and impossible expectations," Mom snapped. "Rose lived in a fantasy world, Emma. Prince Charming, true love, happily ever after. Look where that got her." I stared at her. Grandpa adored her. Everyone said they had the most beautiful love story. Beautiful love story. Your grandfather barely spoke to her the last 10 years of their marriage. She spent her final years talking to photographs and rereading old letters like some pathetic woman living in the past. I want to honor her memory. I want to feel close to her on the most important day of my life. Then buy a dress from this decade and move on. That old rag would have made you look like you were playing dress up in a museum. I looked down at the dress in my arms. Even damaged, I could see the exquisite craftsmanship. The silk had been hand-dyed to the perfect shade of ivory. The lace was genuine French Alencon, delicate as spiderwebs. The tiny seed pearls had been sewn on one by one. She spent 3 months making this dress. She saved every penny from her job at the telephone company to buy the silk. She stayed up late every night after work, sewing by lamplight because they couldn't afford electricity in the bedroom. "Sounds like a woman who didn't know her worth," Rick said sarcastically. "Sounds like a woman who understood that some things are worth the sacrifice," I shot back. Mom stepped closer. "Emma, I'm trying to help you. Your wedding is in 3 weeks. David's bridal still has that beautiful strapless gown you tried on. It's modern, it's elegant, it's you." It's not me. It's what you think I should be. It's what a grown woman wears to her wedding, not some costume from a bygone era. Something flickered across Mom's face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. I'm not cruel. I'm practical. Rose filled your head with stories about perfect love and magical weddings, and now you can't appreciate what's real. I'm taking what's left of the dress, I said firmly. Maybe it can be repaired. Mom sighed. Be realistic. Look at it. It's destroyed. Some things can't be saved. I held the dress tighter. Some things shouldn't be thrown away. As I walked back to my car, I heard Rick say to Mom, "Finally, maybe now she'll stop living in the past." I sat in my car for 20 minutes, crying over the ruins of silk and lace spread across my passenger seat. The dress looked even worse in the harsh Arizona sunlight, but as I gently touched the fabric, I could still feel the love that had been sewn into every stitch. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "How's the dress hunting going? Can't wait to see you in whatever you choose. Love you." I started to type back, then deleted the words. How could I tell my fiancé that the dress representing everything I believed about love and commitment was sitting in pieces in my car? I drove home in silence, the broken dress carefully laid across my backseat like an injured friend. In my apartment, I spread it out on my bed and really looked at the damage. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe some things couldn't be saved. But I remembered something Grandma Rose used to say. The most beautiful things are often the ones that have been broken and mended with love. 2 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations that felt hollow and meaningless. I'd called 3 different seamstresses, and each one had given me the same verdict after seeing photos of the damaged dress. Impossible to repair. The silk was too fragile, the tears too extensive, the missing beadwork too intricate to replace. One woman had actually laughed when I described what I was hoping to accomplish. "Honey," she'd said, not unkindly, "that dress has lived its life. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let something beautiful rest in peace." But I couldn't let it rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma Rose's face the day she'd first shown me the dress. I was 7 years old, visiting her little house in Tucson for the summer while Mom and Dad were going through their divorce. Grandma had pulled me into her bedroom, conspiracy written all over her weathered face. "Want to see something magical, mija?" she'd whispered, using the Spanish endearment that made me feel special and loved. She'd opened her cedar chest with the reverence of someone handling holy relics. The dress had emerged like something from a fairy tale, ivory silk cascading over her arms like liquid moonlight. The lace sleeves were delicate as butterfly wings, and when she held it up to the window, the afternoon light caught the tiny seed pearls sewn across the bodice, making them gleam like stars. "I made this for the most important day of my life," she'd told me, her dark eyes soft with memory. "The day I married your grandfather. Took me 3 months of nights working by lamplight because we were too poor for electricity in the bedroom. But I knew it had to be perfect. When you love someone that much, mija, you put that love into everything you touch." She'd let me try it on that day, the enormous skirt pooling around my small frame, while she pinned the bodice so I could see how I'd look someday. "This dress is waiting for you, Emma. When you find your true love, when you're ready to promise your heart to someone forever, this dress will be here. It carries all the love your grandfather and I shared, and it will carry your love too." Now, sitting in my apartment, with the ruins of that dress spread across my kitchen table, I felt like I was betraying not just Grandma Rose's memory, but the naive 7-year-old who had believed in fairy tales and happily ever after. Michael had been understanding when I'd finally told him what happened, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Baby, it's just a dress," he'd said gently, pulling me into his arms. "I'm going to love you just as much whether you're wearing vintage silk or a potato sack. The dress doesn't make the marriage." He was right, of course, but he didn't understand that it wasn't about the dress itself. It was about the connection to the woman who had shaped my understanding of love, who had been my anchor during my parents' messy divorce,
who had taught me that some things were worth fighting for even when the world told you to give up. Mom had called twice since the dumpster incident, both times to check on my wedding preparations, in a tone that suggested she was really checking to make sure I'd come to my senses about the dress. I'd let both calls go to voicemail. "Emma, honey, I hope you're not still upset about that old dress," her voice had said through the speaker. "I know change is hard, but sometimes parents have to make tough decisions for their children's own good. You'll thank me when you see how beautiful you look in a modern gown. I've already called David's Bridal to put that strapless dress on hold. We can go this weekend to finalize the fitting." The presumption in her voice had made my blood boil, as if throwing away my most treasured possession somehow gave her the right to make my wedding decisions for me. The third day after the incident was a Saturday. I'd taken the weekend off from my job at the botanical garden to focus on wedding planning, but instead I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the dress fragments like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. The tears seemed to mock me, the missing beadwork like gaps in my memory of Grandma Rosa's stories. I was contemplating whether to try one more seamstress when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw an elderly Asian woman I didn't recognize, holding what looked like a large package wrapped in white tissue paper. She was tiny, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "You are Emma Rodriguez, the granddaughter of Rose Martinez?" My heart started beating faster. "Yes, how did you... Who are you?" She smiled, and her whole face transformed with warmth. "I am Mrs. Chen. I have been seamstress in Phoenix for 43 years. I knew your grandmother."
I stared at her. Grandma Rose had never mentioned knowing a seamstress named Mrs. Chen. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. May I come in? I have something that belongs to you." Something in her tone, a gentle urgency, made me step aside. She entered my small living room with careful steps, still cradling the wrapped package like something precious. "I live on Maple Street," she said, settling carefully onto my couch, 3 houses down from where your mother lives now. "I was in my garden Thursday morning when I heard shouting. I saw you climbing into the dumpster, saw you crying over something white and beautiful." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "You saw that?" "I saw a granddaughter's heart breaking," she said simply. "After you left, after your mother went inside, I could not stop thinking about what I had witnessed. I have been seamstress for many years, señora. I know the difference between discarded clothing and discarded love." She paused, studying my face with eyes that seemed to see more than I was comfortable revealing. That night, I could not sleep, so I did something perhaps foolish for an old woman. I went to that dumpster, and I rescued what I could. My breath caught. "You went through the trash?" "I have 6 granddaughters," she said with a slight smile. "I understand the value of things that others might throw away. And when I saw what was in that dumpster..." She carefully unwrapped the tissue paper, revealing a sight that made me gasp. It was Grandma Rosa's dress, but transformed. The tears had been invisibly mended with silk threads so fine it disappeared into the original fabric. The missing beadwork had been replaced with pearls that matched so perfectly they might have been sewn by the same hands 70 years ago. The coffee stains were gone, the damaged lace restored to its original delicate beauty. But more than that, the dress looked somehow renewed, as if it had been sleeping and had now awakened, refreshed, and ready for its next chapter. "How is this possible?" I whispered, afraid to touch it in case it disappeared like a mirage. Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled. "I am very good at my job, but also this dress wanted to be saved. Some garments, they fight you when you try to repair them. The fabric resists, the thread breaks. Nothing sits properly. But this dress," she touched the restored silk reverently, "this dress sang under my hands. It wanted to be beautiful again." I felt tears starting to fall. "I can't afford to pay you what this must have cost. The work, the materials..." She held up a weathered hand. I did not do this for money, child. I did this because your grandmother was my friend, and because some things should not be thrown away by people who do not understand their value. My friend? I stared at her, but Grandma never mentioned. Rose and I met in 1987 at the community center in the English as a Second Language class. I had been in America for 5 years, but my English was still very poor. Rose was volunteering as a tutor. She was the first person who made me feel welcome in this country. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean my mother asked her not to? Mrs. Chen shifted uncomfortably on my couch, her weathered hands smoothing the restored silk of the dress. Perhaps I have said too much already. Some family matters should remain private. No, I said firmly, moving to sit across from her. Please, I need to understand. My grandmother meant everything to me, and I'm finding out there were parts of her life I knew nothing about. Why would my mother want to keep your friendship secret? She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those perceptive eyes. Finally, she sighed. Your mother believed that Rose had too many outside influences, people who encouraged her to live in the past instead of accepting her present circumstances. What does that mean? It means your mother thought I was a bad influence because I encouraged Rose to keep her memories alive, to honor her history instead of forgetting it. Mrs. Chen's voice grew stronger, more defiant. Your mother wanted Rose to move on, as she put it, to stop talking about Mexico, to stop speaking Spanish, to stop telling the old stories. She thought it was unhealthy. I felt a familiar anger rising in my chest. That sounds exactly like something Mom would say. She did the same thing to me growing up, tried to erase anything that connected me to Dad's side of the family after the divorce. Mrs. Chen nodded knowingly. Your grandmother worried about this. She saw how your mother was reshaping your childhood, trying to make you fit into a different kind of life. It broke her heart. So you two stayed friends in secret? For over 30 years, she confirmed. We met for coffee every Tuesday at the little cafe on Central Avenue. We quilted together. We shared recipes. We talked about our grandchildren. Rose taught me to make tamales, and I taught her to embroider silk. She was one of my dearest friends. I looked down at the dress, seeing it with new eyes. The restoration work, it's incredible. How did you know exactly how to repair it? Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up with something that might have been mischief. Because I helped her make it. What? In 1952, I was just 15 years old, living in San Francisco's Chinatown with my family. But even then, I knew how to sew. My grandmother had taught me the traditional techniques, how to work with silk, how to set pearls, and how to create lace that would last for generations. She touched the dress gently. Rose found me through a friend of a friend. She had the design, she had saved the money for materials, but she needed someone with the skills to make her vision real. I stared at her, trying to process this revelation. You made my grandmother's wedding dress? We made it together. She would come to Chinatown every weekend for 3 months. My family thought she was crazy, a Mexican girl wanting to learn Chinese silk techniques for her wedding dress. But my grandmother saw something in Rose, a determination that reminded her of herself as a young bride. She decided to teach her. Mrs. Chen stood and moved to the dress, pointing out details I'd never noticed before. See these tiny stitches along the bodice seam? That's a technique my grandmother learned from her grandmother in China. And this pattern in the lace, Rose designed it herself, but we used traditional Chinese knotwork to create the foundation. The pearl setting technique came from my family's jewelry-making traditions. I ran my fingers along the seams she indicated, amazed by the intricate work. This dress isn't just Mexican or Chinese, it's both. Rose wanted it that way. She said her marriage to your grandfather was about bringing 2 worlds together, and her dress should represent that unity. She wanted to honor both traditions.
Mrs. Chen's voice grew soft with memory. She was so young, so in love, so full of hope for the future. But how did you end up in Phoenix? How did you reconnect with her decades later? Life is strange, child. My husband's job brought us here in 1982. I had no idea Rose was living here until I saw her at that English class in 1987. She had been struggling since your grandfather's death, trying to learn better English so she could get a job to support herself. When I walked into that classroom and saw her face, Mrs. Chen smiled. It was like finding a sister I thought I had lost forever. I thought about all the Tuesdays throughout my childhood when Grandma Rose had been mysteriously busy, unable to spend time with me because she had errands to run. All those times I'd found her humming Chinese melodies under her breath, or when I'd discovered strange new recipes in her kitchen that didn't seem Mexican at all.
She never told me any of this, I said, feeling a mixture of sadness and betrayal. We were so close, especially after Grandpa died. Why would she keep such a big part of her life secret from me? Mrs. Chen's expression grew troubled. Because your mother made it clear that Rose's friendship with me was problematic. She said it was confusing for you to be exposed to too many different cultures, that it would make it harder for you to fit in with your peers. She worried you would become too attached to old world ways of thinking. That's ridiculous. Perhaps, but your mother was very persuasive. She convinced Rose that keeping our friendship quiet was better for everyone, especially for you. Rose loved you so much, Emma. She would have done anything to protect your relationship with your mother, even if it meant hiding parts of herself. I felt tears starting to form. So she chose my relationship with Mom over being honest with me? She chose love over pride, she corrected gently. It was not about choosing sides. It was about keeping peace in a family that was already fractured by divorce and hurt feelings. Rose believed that someday, when you were older, she would tell you everything. She had so many stories she wanted to share with you. But she ran out of time. Yes, the cancer came too quickly at the end. She was so focused on fighting it, on spending her last months with you, that she never found the right moment for difficult conversations. Mrs. Chen reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped bundle. But she did leave something for you, something she asked me to keep safe until you were ready. My hands trembled as I unwrapped the tissue paper. Inside was a small silk pouch, embroidered with the same intricate pattern that decorated the dress's lace. The pouch was heavy, filled with something that clinked softly when I moved it. "What is it? Open it," Mrs. Chen encouraged. Inside the pouch were dozens of small seed pearls, each one perfectly matched to the ones on the dress. But underneath the pearls was something that made me gasp. A folded piece of paper with my name written in Grandma Rose's careful handwriting. "She wrote you a letter," Mrs. Chen said softly, "to be given to you on your wedding day, along with extra pearls in case any were ever lost from the dress. She wanted to make sure her gift to you could be preserved for your own daughter someday." With shaking hands, I unfolded the letter. It was dated just 6 months before Grandma Rose's death. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, it means Mrs. Chen has found you and returned the dress that was always meant to be yours. It also means I am no longer there to tell you the stories I should have shared while I had the chance." I looked up at Mrs. Chen, who was watching me with knowing eyes. "There's more," she said quietly. "Much more that Rose wanted you to know. But first, you should read her letter. Then, if you're ready, I can show you what else she left for you." I clutched the letter to my chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was discovering. My grandmother had lived an entire secret life,
one filled with friendships and traditions and stories that had been hidden from me for decades. And somehow, Mrs. Chen had been keeping it all safe, waiting for the right moment to return it to me. Why now? Why didn't you come forward before? She smiled sadly. Because Rose made me promise to wait until you truly needed to know who she was. She said I would recognize the moment when it came. She gestured toward the restored dress. When I saw you crying over this dress, when I saw how desperately you needed to feel connected to her memory, I knew the time had finally come.
My hands trembled as I unfolded Grandma Rose's letter completely. Her handwriting, usually so steady and precise, showed slight tremors that betrayed how sick she must have been when she wrote it. But her words were clear, purposeful, and heartbreakingly honest. My dearest Emma, the letter continued, if you are reading this, it means Mrs. Chen has found you and returned the dress that was always meant to be yours. It also means I am no longer there to tell you the stories I should have shared while I had the chance. I have carried so many secrets, Mija, not because I wanted to hide from you, but because I was trying to protect you from the pain that sometimes comes with truth. Your mother believed she was protecting you too, in her own way. But now, as my time grows short, I realize that some truths are more important than peace. The dress you hold was born from a friendship that shaped my entire life. Mrs. Chen, or Lin, as I have called her for 35 years, was more than a seamstress who helped me create my wedding gown. She became the sister I never had, the keeper of my dreams and the witness to my joy and sorrow for decades. When I was 19 and planning my wedding to your grandfather, I had such grand visions. I wanted a dress that would honor both my Mexican heritage and the new life I was building in America. But in 1952, there weren't many people who understood how to blend traditions the way I dreamed. That's when Mrs. Valdez from the church told me about a young Chinese girl in San Francisco who could work miracles with silk and pearls. Lynn was just 15, but her hands knew secrets passed down through generations of Chinese seamstresses. When I showed her my sketches, when I told her about wanting to combine Alençon lace with traditional Mexican embroidery patterns, most people would have said it was impossible. But Lynn's eyes lit up with the same excitement I felt. She understood that love doesn't recognize borders, that beauty can be created when different worlds come together with respect and joy. For 3 months, I took the bus to San Francisco every weekend. Lynn's grandmother, who spoke no English and very little Spanish, taught me through gestures and patience. She showed me how to work with silk so fine it was like capturing moonbeams, how to set pearls so they would catch light like stars, how to create lace that would last for generations without losing its delicate beauty. But more than that, those weekends taught me about friendship across cultures, about the way women can support each other's dreams even when the world tells them those dreams are impossible. Lynn's family welcomed me into their tiny apartment above the fabric shop, fed me traditional Chinese meals, and treated me like a daughter even though I was a stranger from a different world. Your grandfather never fully understood why that dress meant so much to me. He saw the beauty, appreciated the craftsmanship, but he thought my attachment to it was sentimentality. He didn't realize that the dress represented my first real friendship, my first experience of being accepted exactly as I was. Not Mexican enough for some people, not American enough for others, but perfectly myself in Lynn's eyes. When Lynn moved to Phoenix in 1982, finding her again felt like a miracle. Your grandfather had been dead for 3 years by then, and I was struggling with loneliness and uncertainty about my future. That first Tuesday we spent together at the cafe on Central Avenue, I cried so hard that other customers kept asking if I needed help. I wasn't crying from sadness.
I was crying from relief. I had found my friend again, the one person who remembered the girl I had been before life wore me down with disappointments and compromises. Your mother never understood our friendship. She saw Lynn as a relic from my past, someone who encouraged me to speak Spanish instead of perfect English, who reminded me of traditions she thought I should leave behind. Diane was trying to help you fit into American society, mija. She believed that the more foreign influences you were exposed to, the harder it would be for you to succeed. She made it clear that my friendship with Lynn was confusing for you, that it sent mixed messages about what kind of person you should become. I should have fought harder for that friendship. I should have insisted that knowing Lynn would make you richer, not more confused. But I was tired, Emma. Tired of fighting with your mother about everything. About speaking Spanish around you, about cooking traditional foods, about telling you stories of Mexico that she said would make you feel like an outsider in your own country. So I chose peace. I chose to keep Lynn as my secret, to meet her only when you were at school or busy with friends. I told myself it was temporary, that when you were older, I would introduce you properly and explain everything. I thought I had more time.
I looked up at Mrs. Chen, who was sitting quietly with her hands folded, watching my face as I read. She felt guilty about the secrecy, I said. Every Tuesday for 30 years, Mrs. Chen confirmed. She would tell me stories about you, what you were learning in school, what you were interested in, how proud she was of the young woman you were becoming. But she always ended by saying, "Someday I'll bring Emma to meet you properly. Someday she'll understand." I returned to the letter, my heart aching for the grandmother who had sacrificed so much to keep peace in our fractured family. But there is something else you must know, something that will help you understand why I made the choices I did. Your mother's fear of my friendship with Lynn wasn't just about cultural confusion. It was about a secret that Lynn and I discovered together, a secret about your grandfather that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. In 1989, 2 years after Lynn and I reconnected, we were going through old photos from my wedding day. Lynn noticed something in the background of one picture that I had never seen before. A woman standing at the back of the church, partially hidden behind a pillar. Lynn recognized her immediately. It was Su Ming, a Chinese woman who had worked at the same fabric shop where we created my wedding dress. At first, I thought it was simply a coincidence. San Francisco's Chinese community was small in those days. Perhaps Su Ming had been in the neighborhood and curious about the Mexican girl who had spent so many weekends learning traditional techniques. But when Lynn contacted Su Ming to ask about it, we learned something that shattered my understanding of my own wedding day. Su Ming had been there because your grandfather had asked her to come, not as a guest, but as a witness to something he needed her to see. You see, mija, your grandfather had been to that fabric shop before I ever arrived. He had been there many times, not to buy fabric, but to court Su Ming, whom he had been secretly seeing for over a year. My wedding day wasn't just the celebration of our love. It was the day your grandfather chose between two women, two futures, two completely different lives. Su Ming came to the church because she needed to see his choice with her own eyes, needed the closure of watching him marry someone else. I never confronted your grandfather about this discovery. By 1989, he had been dead for 6 years, and what would have been the point of poisoning my memories with anger over choices that could never be changed? But it explains so much about our marriage, the distance that sometimes crept between us, the way he would grow quiet when I talked about my friendship with Lynn's family, the reason he never wanted to return to San Francisco even for visits. Lynn helped me work through the pain of this discovery. She reminded me that your grandfather had chosen me, had built a life with me, had loved me in his own complicated way for 37 years. She helped me understand that love is rarely simple, that people can care for more than one person while still being faithful to their commitments. Most importantly, she helped me realize that this secret didn't diminish the love that created your father, or the joy I felt raising him, or the pride I take in watching you become the remarkable woman you are today. Some truths are worth knowing not because they change the past, but because they help us understand how complex and precious love really is. I set the letter down, overwhelmed. Grandpa was seeing someone else before he married her?
Mrs. Chen nodded gravely. For 14 months, Rose was a very special woman, beautiful, intelligent, from a good family, but your grandfather's family would never have accepted a Chinese daughter-in-law in 1952. The prejudice was too strong, the cultural barriers too high. So he chose the safer option. He chose survival, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. And perhaps he chose love too, just a different kind of love. Rose believed that your grandfather grew to love her truly and deeply, even if she wasn't his first choice. Sometimes the heart learns to love what the mind chooses. I picked up the letter again, knowing there was more to read, but needing a moment to process what I'd already learned. Everything I thought I knew about my family was shifting, rearranging itself into new patterns that were both more complex and more human than the simple love story I'd always believed. There's more in the letter, isn't there? Mrs. Chen's expression grew even more serious. Much more. And when you're ready, there are other things Rose left for you. Photos, documents, objects that tell the rest of the story. She paused. Are you prepared to learn everything, Emma? Once you know all of it, you can never go back to the simpler version of your family's history.
I stared at Mrs. Chen for a long moment, weighing her words. The simple love story I'd grown up believing, Grandma Rose and Grandpa meeting at a church dance, falling instantly in love, building a perfect marriage that lasted until his death, was already crumbling around me. But something inside me, the same stubborn curiosity that had driven me to study botany, that made me want to understand how things grew and why they died, needed to know the complete truth. Yes, I said firmly, I need to know everything. Mrs. Chen reached into her large purse and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with contents. Rose gave me this 6 months before she died. She made me promise to only share it if you were ready to understand that people are complicated, that love comes in many forms, and that family secrets aren't always meant to hurt. She handed me the envelope with the same reverence she'd shown the dress. My name was written across the front in Grandma Rose's handwriting, along with the words, "For Emma's wedding day, the whole truth." Inside were dozens of photographs I'd never seen before, along with what looked like letters, documents, and small wrapped objects. The first photo I pulled out made me gasp. It was my wedding dress, but not as I'd ever seen it. In this picture, it was being worn by a Chinese woman who looked to be in her 20s, standing in what appeared to be the same fabric shop Mrs. Chen had described. "That's Su Ming," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "wearing your grandmother's dress in 1953, a year after Rose's wedding." I stared at the photo. But why would she be wearing Grandma's dress? Because Rose gave it to her. The world seemed to tilt sideways. She gave away her wedding dress? Mrs. Chen settled back into the couch, preparing for what was clearly a long story. After Rose discovered the truth about your grandfather's relationship with Su Ming, she became consumed with curiosity about this woman who had almost become her husband's wife. Through our friendship, she was able to learn more about Su Ming's life, her family, her dreams. She pulled out another photo, this one showing Grandma Rose and the Chinese woman sitting together at what looked like a cafe, both smiling warmly at the camera. They became friends? I asked incredulously. More than friends. They became sisters. Su Ming had never married after your grandfather chose Rose. She had convinced herself she was unlovable, that she would never be anyone's first choice. When Rose reached out to her in 1989, Su Ming was 49 years old and still living alone, still believing she had somehow failed at life. She handed me another photo. This one showing Su Ming in a wedding dress, not Grandma Rose's dress, but a beautiful Chinese qipao-style gown in ivory silk with traditional gold embroidery. Rose decided that Su Ming deserved to experience the joy of being a bride, even if she had never found her groom. So, she organized a ceremony. What kind of ceremony? A celebration of Su Ming herself. Rose invited everyone from our Tuesday coffee group, 12 women who had become like family to her over the years. We decorated the community center with flowers from Rose's garden. We hired a photographer. We made traditional Chinese and Mexican foods. And we celebrated Su Ming as the beautiful, worthy woman that she had always been. I looked back at the first photo, seeing it with new understanding. So Su Ming wore Grandma's dress for the ceremony.
Rose insisted. She said the dress had been made with love and hope, and that Su Ming deserved to feel that same love and hope surrounding her. But more than that, Mrs. Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. Rose believed that sharing the dress would heal something that had been broken between them, some wound that your grandfather had unknowingly created by making them rivals instead of allowing them to be what they naturally became, friends. I continued looking through the photos. There were pictures of the ceremony showing Su Ming glowing with happiness as she was surrounded by women celebrating her. There were photos of Grandma Rose fastening the dress's tiny pearl buttons, both women crying and laughing simultaneously. There were group shots of all the women together, a rainbow of ethnicities and ages united in joy. "This is beautiful," I whispered, "but I still don't understand why Mom never knew about any of this." Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. "Because your mother found out about the ceremony 3 days before it happened. She handed me a letter, this one not in Grandma Rose's handwriting, but in my mother's sharp, angular script. It was addressed to Rose and dated 1989. Mom, I cannot believe what Lin Chen just told me. You are planning to give away your wedding dress, Dad's mother's wedding dress, to some woman who was trying to steal him from you. Have you completely lost your mind? This is exactly why I didn't want Emma spending so much time with you and your international friends. You're filling her head with ridiculous ideas about forgiveness and acceptance when what you should be teaching her is self-respect and appropriate boundaries."
If you go through with this insane ceremony, I will have no choice but to limit Emma's visits with you. I will not have my daughter learning that it's normal to befriend your husband's ex-lovers or to give away precious family heirlooms to strangers. Some things should be kept in the family, and some behaviors are simply inappropriate for a widow and grandmother. Cancel this ceremony, Mom. Keep your dress. Maintain some dignity. Think about what's best for Emma instead of indulging in whatever midlife crisis this is supposed to be. I set the letter down, feeling sick. Mom threatened to keep me away from Grandma Rose if she went through with the ceremony? Your grandmother was devastated, Mrs. Chen confirmed. She had been so excited about the celebration, so proud of the friendship she had built with Su Ming. But the thought of losing time with you? She shook her head. Rose canceled everything 3 days before the ceremony was supposed to happen. I looked back at the photo of Su Ming in the wedding dress. But she still wore the dress? Rose couldn't bear to disappoint Su Ming completely. So instead of a big celebration, we had a small, private ceremony. Just the 3 of us in Rose's living room. Su Ming wore the dress, I took photos, and Rose made her promise that someday, when the time was right, she would find someone worthy of her love. Mrs. Chen pulled out one more photo from the envelope. This one showed 3 women, Grandma Rose, Mrs. Chen, and Su Ming, standing together in what I recognized as Grandma Rose's living room. Su Ming was indeed wearing the wedding dress, but she had also been crowned with a circlet of desert wildflowers. All 3 women were beaming with joy, despite the tears on their faces. Su Ming kept the dress? I asked. Only for a week. Then she insisted on returning it to Rose with a note saying that the dress belonged with the woman who had shown her what true generosity of spirit looked like. But Rose had it cleaned and preserved, and from that day forward, she thought of it not just as her wedding dress, but as a symbol of the capacity for love to heal old wounds. I was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I had learned. My grandmother had not only discovered her husband's secret love affair, but had befriended the other woman and tried to heal the pain that secret had caused. When my mother had threatened to use me as leverage to stop this act of radical forgiveness, Grandma Rose had chosen my welfare over her own healing. "There's something else," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Something that will help you understand why your mother reacted so strongly to the friendship with Su Ming." She handed me a small wrapped bundle from the envelope. Inside was a piece of jewelry, a delicate gold necklace with a pendant that took my breath away.
It was clearly Chinese in design, depicting two intertwined dragons surrounded by tiny pearls. Su Ming made this for your mother, as a peace offering. She wanted Diane to understand that her friendship with Rose wasn't about the past, but about healing and moving forward. Su Ming had learned jewelry making from her own grandmother, and she spent months creating this piece specifically for your mother. Did Mom ever see it? Her expression was sad. Rose tried to give it to her several times, but Diane refused to accept it. She said it was inappropriate to accept gifts from that woman, and that Rose was being manipulated by people who didn't understand American values. I held the necklace up to the light, watching how the small pearls caught and reflected the sunlight streaming through my apartment windows. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each dragon scale was individually detailed, and the pearls were set so precisely they seemed to float around the golden creatures. What happened to Su Ming after all this? Mrs. Chen smiled for the first time since beginning this part of the story. She found love, actually. 2 years later, she met a widowed man named Henry Chen, no relation to me, just coincidence, at the library where she had started volunteering. He was a retired professor, recently moved to Phoenix from Chicago. They married in 1991, and Su Ming finally got to experience the joy of being someone's first choice. They're still married? Henry died in 2018, but yes, they had 27 wonderful years together. Su Ming lives in a senior community now, but she still asks about you every time I see her. Rose used to share stories about your accomplishments, your engagement, your dreams. Su Ming feels like she knows you even though you've never met. I looked again at all the photos spread across my coffee table. Images of friendships that had been hidden from me. Celebrations I'd never been allowed to witness. Love stories that had been deemed too complicated for a child to understand. How many other secrets are there? I asked. Mrs. Chen checked her watch. Many, but perhaps that's enough for today. You have a wedding to plan, and this has been a lot to absorb. She began gathering the photos. Unless there is one more thing Rose specifically wanted you to see before your wedding day, something that explains why she was so insistent that you wear this dress when you married Michael. I looked at her expectantly. She left you a video message.
Mrs. Chen reached into her purse one final time and pulled out a small digital camera, the kind that had been popular about 10 years ago. Rose learned to use this when she was in hospice. One of the nurses taught her because she was determined to leave you something more personal than letters. My hands shook as I took the camera. The small screen showed a single video file dated 6 months before Grandma Rose's death. I pressed play, and suddenly my grandmother's face filled the screen, thinner than I remembered, her cheekbones more prominent from the cancer treatments, but her dark eyes still bright with the warmth I had loved so much. "Hola, my beautiful Emma," her voice said, and I immediately started crying. "If you are watching this, it means Lynn has given you my dress and you have learned some difficult truths about our family. I know this must be confusing and painful, mija. I wish I could be there to hold your hand through it, but perhaps this is better. Perhaps you needed to discover these things when you were old enough to understand that love is never as simple as the stories we tell children." Grandma Rose adjusted her position in what I recognized as her hospital bed, wincing slightly from the movement. "I want to tell you about your mother, Emma. About why she made the choices she did, why she was so afraid of my friendship with Lynn and Su Ming, why she tried so hard to keep you from learning about our family's complicated history." She paused, gathering her strength. "Your mother was 7 years old when her father left. Not divorced, not separated. He simply disappeared one morning, leaving behind a note saying he had found someone who made him happier. Her mother, your abuela Patricia, was devastated. She spent the next 10 years crying every night, talking constantly about the husband who had abandoned them, wondering what she had done wrong, what she could have done differently. This was a story I had never heard before,
My mother's father had always been described simply as someone who wasn't in the picture, and I had never thought to ask for details. Diane grew up watching her mother destroy herself with questions that had no answers. She watched Patricia refuse to date other men because she was still hoping her husband would come back. She watched her mother keep his clothes in the closet for 15 years, keep his favorite foods in the pantry, keep his photograph on the nightstand like a shrine to abandonment. Grandma Rose's voice grew stronger, more insistent. When your father introduced me to Diane, she was 23 years old and absolutely terrified that she would end up like her mother, destroyed by a man who left her for someone else. She had made herself a promise that she would never allow herself to be vulnerable to that kind of pain. I paused the video, trying to process this information. My mother's controlling behavior, her need to eliminate any reminders of people who had left or died, suddenly made sense in a way it never had before. I pressed play again. When your father died in that car accident, Diane was pregnant with you and absolutely convinced that she was cursed to lose everyone she loved. She became obsessed with controlling everything she could control: your environment, your influences, your understanding of family history. She believed that if she could protect you from knowing about loss and disappointment, she could protect you from experiencing it. Grandma Rose shifted again, and I could see how much effort this recording was costing her. When she found out about my friendship with Su Ming, about the woman your grandfather had loved before me, it triggered every fear Diane had about men who choose other women. She saw it as proof that all men are unfaithful, that all marriages are built on lies, that all love stories end in betrayal. The video showed Grandma Rose reaching for a glass of water with trembling hands. She made me choose, Emma, between my friendship with Su Ming and my relationship with you. She said that if I continued to associate with that woman, if I kept filling your head with stories about forgiveness and complicated love, she would stop bringing you to visit me. My heart broke watching my grandmother's face as she relived this painful memory. I should have fought harder. I should have told her that teaching you to see the complexity in people would make you stronger, not weaker. But I was selfish, Mija. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my time with you. You were the light of my life, the reason I got up each morning after your grandfather died. So I agreed to keep my friendship secret. She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her gathering courage for something even more difficult. But there's something else you need to know about your mother's fears. Something that happened when you were 3 years old that shaped every decision she made about your upbringing after that. I felt my stomach drop. What else could there possibly be? Rick wasn't the first man your mother dated after your father died. There was someone else. Someone she loved very much and thought she might marry. His name was David Morales, and he was wonderful with you. You called him Uncle Dave, and you adored him. He would take you to the zoo, read you stories, teach you Spanish words that made you giggle. I had no memory of this man, but something about the name felt familiar, like an echo from a dream.
David and your mother dated for 2 years. She was starting to believe that maybe she could have love and happiness again. That maybe she wasn't cursed after all. He proposed to her on your 3rd birthday, right here in my living room, with you sitting on his lap, clapping your hands because you thought it was all part of the party. Grandmother Rose's voice became strained. 3 weeks before their wedding, David came to see your mother. He was crying, Emma. This strong, proud man was crying like a child. He had received a job offer in Seattle, a promotion that would set his career for life. But more than that, he had reconnected with his college girlfriend who lived there. He said he still loved your mother, but he loved this other woman too, and he couldn't marry Diane knowing his heart was divided. I felt sick. Another man who had chosen someone else, just like my mother's father, just like what she believed about my grandfather. Your mother was destroyed,
But worse than her own pain was watching you wait by the window every day for Uncle Dave to come back. You didn't understand why he had disappeared. You kept asking when he was coming to play with you again, when he was going to take you to see the elephants like he had promised. The video showed Grandmother Rose wiping tears from her own eyes. That's when your mother made the decision to never let anyone into your life who might leave. She broke up with any man she dated if you started to get attached. She moved you away from this neighborhood so you wouldn't keep looking for David. She married Rick specifically because he had no interest in being a father figure to you. He was safe because he would never make you promises he might not keep. Everything about my childhood suddenly made sense. Mom's strange rule about not getting too attached to her boyfriends. The way she would end relationships that seemed to be going well. Her insistence that Rick maintain distance from me even after they married. Her terror whenever I formed close bonds with older male figures like teachers or neighbors. She was trying to protect you from the pain she had experienced, the pain she had watched you experience, Grandmother Rose continued. But in doing so, she also protected you from the joy of deep connections, from the understanding that some people are worth the risk of loving, even if they might eventually leave. The video showed Grandmother Rose leaning closer to the camera. That's why this dress is so important, mija. It represents the idea that love is worth the risk, that beauty can come from bringing different worlds together, that forgiveness and friendship can heal old wounds. Your mother sees the dress as a symbol of all the ways love can disappoint us. But I see it as proof that love can surprise us, transform us, and connect us in ways we never expected. She smiled them, the first full smile I had seen in the video. When you wear this dress to marry Michael, you will be choosing hope over fear, connection over protection, love over safety. You will be choosing to believe in the possibility of happily ever after, even though you now know that all love stories are complicated. Grandmother Rose reached toward the camera as if she could touch my face through the screen. Your mother loves you, mija. Every choice she made, even the ones that hurt me, even the ones that kept secrets from you, were motivated by her desperate desire to protect you from pain. But now you are old enough to choose for yourself what kind of risks are worth taking. The video began to fade, but I could hear her voice one more time. Wear the dress, mija. Wear it with pride, with knowledge, with understanding of all the love and loss and hope that went into every stitch. And remember that the most beautiful love stories are the ones that survive the truth about how complicated love really is. The screen went black, leaving me sitting in my living room with tears streaming down my face and a completely new understanding of every person in my family. Mrs. Chen, who had been sitting quietly while I watched, handed me a tissue. Your grandmother recorded 3 more videos, one for your mother, one for Michael, and one for your future children. But she made me promise to only give you those after your wedding, when you had time to process everything else. I looked down at the restored dress, seeing it now not just as a beautiful garment, but as a tangible representation of everything my family had struggled with for generations. The tension between safety and risk, between protecting loved ones and allowing them to make their own choices, between holding on to the past and embracing an uncertain future. Mrs. Chen, I said quietly, I need to call my mother. I sat in my car outside my mother's house for 20 minutes before I found the courage to walk to the front door. The restored wedding dress hung carefully in my back seat, wrapped in the same tissue paper Mrs. Chen had used to return it to me. In my hands, I carried the manila envelope full of photos, letters, and the small digital camera containing Grandma Rose's video message. Rick's truck wasn't in the driveway. A small mercy. This conversation needed to happen between my mother and me alone, without his dismissive comments or attempts to minimize what I had discovered. When Mom opened the door, her face immediately registered surprise and concern. Emma? What are you doing here? You look like you've been crying. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the envelope. "About Grandma Rose, about Uncle Dave, about all the things you never told me." The color drained from her face. She looked past me to my car, where the wrapped dress was clearly visible through the rear window. "Where did you get that dress? I saw Rick throw it away myself." "Someone saved it. Someone who knew what it really meant." Mom stepped aside reluctantly, allowing me into the living room that had been redecorated so many times I sometimes forgot this had once been Grandma Rose's house. Gone were the warm terracotta walls and Mexican tiles, replaced by Rick's preference for beige everything and generic hotel-style artwork. "Emma, whatever you think you've discovered, I know about Mrs. Chen. I know about Suming. I know about the ceremony you made Grandma cancel. And I know about David Morales." My mother sank into her chair as if I had physically struck her. "Who told you about David?" "Grandma Rose. She left me a video message before she died. I set the camera on the coffee table between us. She explained everything, Mom. Why you were so afraid of her friendships, why you married Rick, why you tried to control every relationship in my life." Mom stared at the camera like it might explode. "She had no right to tell you about David. That was private. That was my pain to deal with, not yours. It became your pain the moment you started making decisions about my life based on your fear of what happened to you. I was protecting you," her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your 3-year-old daughter wait by the window every day for someone who's never coming back? To see her little face crumple every time the doorbell rings and it's not Uncle Dave? I couldn't let that happen to you again." I sat down across from her, trying to keep my voice gentle, despite the anger building in my chest. "So you instead made sure I never got close enough to anyone to be hurt when they left. It worked, didn't it? You've never had to experience that kind of abandonment. But I also never got to experience the joy of those relationships while they lasted. You took away my choice to decide what risks were worth taking." Mom's hands twisted in her lap. "You don't understand what it was like. My father left when I was 7. David left 3 weeks before our wedding. My own mother spent 15 years pining for a man who never looked back. I watched her destroy herself with hope that he might return someday. And so you decided I should never hope for anything. I decided you should be realistic about what men are capable of. I decided you shouldn't build your happiness around people who might leave." I pulled out the photos Mrs. Chen had given me, the images of Grandma Rose, Su Ming, and Mrs. Chen together, celebrating friendship and forgiveness despite past hurts. "But look what you made Grandma give up because of that fear. Look at the friendships you destroyed because you couldn't bear the idea that some stories of love and loss have complex, beautiful endings." Mom barely glanced at the photos. "Your grandmother was naive. She lived in a fantasy world where everything worked out for the best, where people who hurt you could become your friends, where love conquers all. That's not how real life works, Emma." "Maybe not. But her way allowed for healing. Your way just passes the pain from one generation to the next." I pulled out the letter Mom had written to Grandma Rose, the one threatening to keep me away if she went through with Suming's ceremony. "You used me as leverage to control her choices. You made her choose between her healing and her relationship with me." Mom's face flushed red. "I was protecting you from being exposed to inappropriate situations. You were 8 years old, Emma. You didn't need to be learning about your grandfather's infidelities or watching your grandmother give away family heirlooms to strangers." "Su Ming wasn't a stranger. She was a woman who had been hurt by the same situation that hurt Grandma, and they found a way to heal together. That's not inappropriate. That's miraculous." "It's insane," Mom snapped. "Normal people don't become friends with their husband's ex-lovers. Normal people maintain boundaries and protect their dignity. And normal people don't spend 30 years hiding from the possibility of love because they're afraid it might end." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of unspoken pain settling between us.
I looked around the room, noticing for the first time how sterile it felt, how carefully everything had been chosen to avoid any emotional attachment or personal history. "Mom," I said quietly, "do you remember what Grandma Rose used to say about broken things?" Her expression softened slightly. She used to say that the most beautiful things were often the ones that had been broken and mended with love. "The dress was torn when you threw it away. Mrs. Chen repaired it, but you can still see where the damage was if you look closely. It's not perfect anymore, but it's still beautiful. Maybe more beautiful because of what it survived." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted you to be safe, Emma. I wanted you to avoid all the pain I went through." "But pain is part of life, Mom, and so is joy, and so is love, and so is the risk that comes with caring about people. You can't eliminate one without eliminating the others." I pulled out the delicate gold necklace Su Ming had made for her all those years ago. "Su Ming made this for you as a peace offering. She wanted you to understand that her friendship with Grandma wasn't about the past. It was about forgiveness and moving forward." Mom stared at the necklace as if it might bite her. I couldn't accept that. It felt like accepting her right to be part of our family story. She was already part of our family story. Grandpa made sure of that when he loved her before he married Grandma. But instead of letting that be a source of pain forever, Grandma found a way to make it a source of healing. I fastened the necklace around my own neck, feeling the weight of the small pearls against my skin. "I'm going to wear this with the dress when I marry Michael, to honor both women, the one who made the dress and the one who helped heal the pain it represented." Mom watched me adjust the necklace, and for a moment I saw something other than fear in her eyes. Maybe curiosity, maybe regret. "The dress really is beautiful," she admitted quietly, "even after everything that happened to it. Especially after everything that happened to it." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression. Not exactly acceptance, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "I know you think I was wrong about everything. Maybe I was. But I need you to understand that every choice I made came from love. Misguided love, maybe, but love nonetheless. I know that, Mom, and I love you despite the choices you made. But I need you to understand that I'm going to make different choices. I'm going to take different risks. I'm going to trust that Michael and I can build something strong enough to survive whatever complications come our way." She nodded slowly. "The wedding is in 2 weeks." "Yes." "And you're going to wear Rose's dress." "Yes." "Even though it represents everything I tried to protect you from, the messiness, the uncertainty, the possibility that love stories don't always end the way we expect them to." I smiled. "Especially because it represents those things. Because I'd rather have a complicated love story than no love story at all." Mom stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the desert landscape that had drawn so many people to Phoenix over the years. People looking for new starts, fresh beginnings, the chance to reinvent themselves under endless blue skies. "I suppose there are worse things than being the mother of a daughter who chooses hope over fear." It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a beginning. "Will you help me get ready on the morning of the wedding? Will you help me put on the dress?" She turned back to me, and I saw her mother's face. Not the fearful, controlling woman she had become, but the young mother who had once braided my hair and told me I could be anything I wanted to be. "Yes," she said simply, "I'll help you put on the dress." The next week passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations that felt completely different now that I understood the true significance of what I was about to do. Every time I looked at the restored dress hanging in my closet, I saw not just a beautiful gown, but a tangible representation of the choice I was making: to embrace love despite its complications, to build a marriage founded on truth rather than protective illusions. Michael had been patient when I tried to explain everything I'd learned, but I could see the concern in his eyes as I told him about Mrs. Chen, about Su Ming, about the video messages and family secrets that had been hidden for decades. "Em, are you sure you're okay with all this?" he'd asked.
pulling me close as we sat on my couch surrounded by the photos and letters Mrs. Chen had given me. I mean, it's a lot to process right before our wedding. If you need more time to work through it, that's exactly why I need to work through it now, I said, touching the Chinese necklace that I'd barely taken off since my conversation with Mom. I don't want to start our marriage with the same kind of secrets that complicated Grandma Rose's life. I want us to know the whole truth about love, that it's messy and complicated, and sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they care about. Michael had been quiet for a moment, studying a photo of Grandma Rose and Su Ming sitting together at their cafe, both women laughing at something beyond the camera's view. "Your grandmother was pretty amazing," he'd said finally. "Not many people would have had the courage to befriend someone in Su Ming's position. Or the generosity to share her wedding dress with her. Or the wisdom to understand that some pain can only be healed by connection, not isolation." That's when I knew Michael truly understood what the dress represented, why it was so important for me to wear it, despite, or maybe because of, everything I'd learned about its history. Mrs. Chen had visited twice more that week, each time bringing additional items Grandma Rose had left for me. There was a small wooden box containing letters Grandpa had written to Grandma during their courtship, letters that revealed a man capable of deep love if he hadn't always been faithful to it. There was a recipe book with traditional Mexican dishes alongside Chinese cooking techniques that Mrs. Chen had taught her. There was even a small photo album documenting the Tuesday coffee meetings that had sustained their friendship for 30 years. "Your grandmother wanted you to understand that love takes many forms," Mrs. Chen had explained as we looked through the album together. "The passionate love she felt for your grandfather, the maternal love she felt for you, the friendship love she felt for me, the healing love she extended to Su Ming. She believed that the more love you allow into your life, the stronger you become, even when some of that love brings pain." On Thursday evening, 5 days before the wedding, Mom called to ask if she could see the dress one more time. I was surprised by the request, but I agreed to bring it to her house that evening. When I arrived, I found her sitting in the living room with what looked like a shoebox on her lap. She seemed nervous, almost fragile in a way I'd rarely seen before. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about the choices I made, about the things I tried to protect you from." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. There's something I need to show you." I set the dress carefully on the couch and watched as she opened the shoebox with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of photographs, letters, and small mementos I'd never seen before. "These are from when you were little," she said, pulling out a photo that made me gasp. It showed me at maybe 2 years old, sitting on a man's shoulders while he pointed at something in the distance. I was laughing with pure joy, my tiny hands tangled in his dark hair. "That's Uncle Dave," she said quietly. "David Morales. I've kept these hidden for 25 years because looking at them hurt too much. But watching you prepare for your wedding, seeing how determined you are to embrace love despite its risks, I realized that hiding from the pain also meant hiding from the joy." She showed me photo after photo of David pushing me on swings, David helping me feed ducks at a pond, David reading to me while I sat curled in his lap. In every picture, both David and I were radiating happiness. "He really did love you," Mom said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "And you absolutely adored him. Those 2 years when he was in our lives, you were the happiest child I'd ever seen. Maybe I was wrong to erase all evidence of that happiness just because it ended." I studied a photo of David helping me blow out candles on what must have been my 3rd birthday cake. In the background, barely visible, I could see Mom watching us with an expression of pure contentment. She had been happy too, before the fear took over. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked.
Because I realize that if I don't change, if I don't learn to handle loss differently, I'm going to miss out on all the joy your marriage might bring. I'm going to be so afraid of you getting hurt that I won't be able to celebrate your happiness. She pulled out one more item from the box, a small jewelry box I recognized from my childhood, though I never known what was inside it. "David gave this to me the night he proposed," she said, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant engagement ring. "I've kept it all these years, not because I was still hoping he'd come back, but because it reminded me of what it felt like to believe in happily ever after." The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire diamond in a vintage setting that looked like it might have belonged to David's grandmother. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about this?" "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd been foolish enough to believe in forever. Ashamed that I'd let you get attached to someone who left. Ashamed that I'd failed to protect both of us from heartbreak." She closed the jewelry box with a soft click. "But watching you with Michael, seeing how committed you both are to building something real together, I don't want to be ashamed anymore." I felt tears starting to fall. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe your grandmother was right. Maybe the most beautiful things are often the ones that have been broken and mended with love. Maybe instead of trying to prevent all future heartbreak, I should focus on celebrating present joy." She stood up and walked to where the wedding dress lay across the couch. "This dress has survived a lot. Being thrown away, being torn, being fought over, being used as a symbol of everything that was wrong with our family's approach to love. But here it is, more beautiful than ever, ready to be part of another love story." Mom touched the delicate lace sleeves, the same gesture I'd seen Grandma Rose make countless times. "I want to be part of your love story, Emma. Not the fearful part that tries to prevent disaster, but the hopeful part that celebrates the courage it takes to promise your heart to someone. Does this mean you approve of me wearing the dress?" She smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes. "It means I'm proud of you for wearing it, for choosing hope over fear, for embracing the complexity of love instead of trying to simplify it into something safe and manageable." I stood up and hugged her, feeling something shift between us that had been broken for a very long time. "Will you help me pack it for the wedding?" "Actually," she said, pulling back to look at me, "I was hoping you might let me do something more than that. I've been thinking about what you said about Mrs. Chen and Su Ming, about how your grandmother found ways to heal old wounds through generosity and inclusion." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'd like to invite Mrs. Chen to the wedding, and if she's willing to give me her contact information, I'd like to invite Su Ming too. It's time I met the women who meant so much to your grandmother, who helped shape the dress that's going to be such an important part of your wedding day." I stared at her, hardly believing what I was hearing. "You want to invite Su Ming to my wedding? The woman you spent years resenting?" "I want to invite the woman my mother-in-law loved, the woman who helped teach my daughter about forgiveness and the complexity of human relationships. I think it's time I learned those lessons too." That night, I called Mrs. Chen to tell her about my mother's invitation. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Your grandmother would be so happy," she said finally. "She always hoped that someday your mother would understand that love multiplies when it's shared. It doesn't divide. Will Su Ming come, do you think?" "I'll ask her. But, Emma, you should know, she's 93 years old now. Travel is difficult for her. However, there is something she wanted me to give you if you ever decided to include her in your wedding celebration." "What is it?" "You'll see," Mrs. Chen said with the mysterious tone I was beginning to recognize. "Some gifts are best discovered in person." The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of Arizona sunshine that makes everything look like it's been touched by gold. I woke up in my childhood bedroom. Mom had insisted I spend the night at her house so we could get ready together, a tradition I hadn't expected her to want to honor. As I lay in bed listening to the sounds of morning preparation downstairs, I felt a strange sense of peace.
For the first time in my life, I felt like I knew the complete truth about my family, about love, about the complicated ways people try to protect each other and sometimes end up causing harm instead. Today, I would wear a dress that carried all of that history, all of that complexity, all of that hard-won wisdom. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Emma, are you awake?" Mom's voice was gentle, excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Come in," I called, sitting up as she entered carrying a breakfast tray and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen on her face since I was a child. "Mrs. Chen is here," she announced, setting the tray on my nightstand. "She brought Su Ming with her, and Emma, you have to see what they've brought for you." My heart leaped. Su Ming came? But Mrs. Chen said travel was difficult for her. Apparently, she told Mrs. Chen that she had waited 70 years to see your grandmother's dress worn by another bride, and she wasn't going to miss it now. Mom's eyes were bright with tears. She's 93 years old, and she took a 6-hour car ride from Tucson just to be here for your wedding. I quickly showered and dressed in my robe, then went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen and Su Min sitting in the living room with what looked like an entire treasure chest of items spread across the coffee table. Su Ming was tiny and fragile, with snow-white hair and the most intelligent dark eyes I'd ever seen. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile that reminded me instantly of Grandma Rose. "Emma," she said in accented but clear English, standing carefully with Mrs. Chen's help, "you look exactly like your grandmother did at your age. The same eyes, the same spirit." I embraced her gently, struck by how small she felt in my arms, but how strong her presence was in the room. "Mrs. Chen said you have something for me?" Su Ming's eyes twinkled with mischief that belied her age. "Many somethings. Your grandmother and we spent 30 years planning for this day, even though we never knew exactly when it would come." She gestured to the coffee table, and I gasped at what I saw. There was a delicate tiara made of tiny seed pearls and silk flowers that perfectly matched the beadwork of the dress. There was a pair of vintage silk gloves embroidered with the same Chinese knotwork pattern that decorated the dress's lace. There was a small bouquet of silk flowers, not fresh flowers, but antique silk ones that looked like they'd been crafted by the same hands that had created the dress's intricate details. What made me cry was the final item on the table, a small leather-bound book with my name embossed in gold on the cover. "What is this?" "Open it," Mrs. Chen encouraged. Inside were pages and pages of wedding wishes written in different hands and different languages. The first page was in Grandma Rose's careful script. "For my dearest Emma, may your marriage be blessed with the kind of love that grows stronger through honesty, deeper through challenge, and more beautiful through forgiveness." The next page was in Chinese characters, with an English translation below in Mrs. Chen's writing. "May your union bring together different worlds in harmony, like silk threads woven into beautiful fabric." Page after page contained wishes from women I'd never met. Friends from the Tuesday coffee group, members of Mrs. Chen's family, even elderly women from Su Ming's senior community who had heard stories about Grandma Rose's granddaughter and wanted to contribute their blessings. "How long have you all been working on this?" I asked through my tears. "Since the day your grandmother told us you were engaged," said Su Ming. "She was so excited, so proud. She said you had found a man who understood that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that happens to you." Mom, who had been watching this entire exchange with wonder, stepped forward. "Su Ming, I owe you an apology. I spent so many years resenting you for being part of my family's story when I should have been grateful that my mother-in-law had such loyal, loving friends." Su Ming studied Mom's face with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "Diane, your mother-in-law never stopped talking about you. Even when she was hurt by your fear, she understood it. She knew you were trying to protect Emma the only way you knew how."
"I was wrong," Mom said simply, "about a lot of things. But especially about believing that loving fewer people would mean hurting less. I see now that it just meant living less." Su Ming smiled and reached into her purse, pulling out one final item, a small wrapped package.
"This is from your grandfather," she said to me. "Something he wanted you to have, though he never knew he was giving it to you." I unwrapped the package with shaking hands, revealing a small jewelry box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet set with tiny pearls that perfectly matched the dress and the tiara. But more than the bracelet itself, there was a note tucked beneath it, written in a man's handwriting I recognized from the old letters Mrs. Chen had shown me. "For Rose, with all my love and the promise that you will always be my choice, today and every day after, your devoted husband, Carlos." "He gave this to your grandmother on their first wedding anniversary," Suming explained. "Rose treasured it, but she always said it should go to you someday. She believed that the love it represented, imperfect but genuine, complicated but committed, was the kind of love she wanted you to find for yourself." I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, feeling the weight of 3 generations of love, loss, and hard-won wisdom. How can I ever thank you both for saving the dress, for keeping Grandma's memory alive, and for being here today? "By being happy," Mrs. Chen said simply, "by choosing love over fear, by building a marriage that honors the complexity of human relationships, by passing these lessons on to your own children someday. And," Suming added with a mischievous smile, "by letting us help you get into that dress. I have been waiting 70 years to see another bride wear the gown I helped create." The next hour was pure magic. Mom, Mrs. Chen, and Suming worked together to help me into the dress, each woman contributing her own expertise. Mom fastened the tiny pearl buttons that ran up the back, her fingers steady and sure. Mrs. Chen adjusted the lace sleeves and positioned the tiara so that it complemented my hair without overwhelming my face. Suming fastened the antique bracelet and handed me the silk bouquet, stepping back to survey their collective work. "Perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." I looked at myself in the full-length mirror Mom had set up in the living room, and for the first time, I truly understood what Grandma Rose had meant about things becoming more beautiful after being broken and mended with love. The dress was exquisite, but it was more than that. It was a tangible representation of healing, of forgiveness, of the courage to embrace love despite its complications. "Your grandmother is here with us," Suming said quietly, as I gazed at my reflection. My mother appeared beside us in the mirror, and I saw 3 generations of women reflected back. My mother learning to choose hope over fear, myself preparing to build a marriage founded on truth and trust, and the spirit of my grandmother who had started it all with her belief that love could overcome anything if you were brave enough to let it. "It's time," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Your groom is waiting." As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, I took one last look around the living room where so many family dramas had played out over the years. But today it was filled with love, with healing, with the kind of joy that comes from facing difficult truths and choosing connection over isolation. I was ready to walk down the aisle carrying not just a bouquet, but the wisdom of 3 women who had taught me that the most beautiful love stories are the ones that survive everything real life can throw at them. The wedding dress that had been thrown away, torn apart, and carefully restored was about to begin its next chapter. And so was I.
The desert botanical garden had been transformed into something magical. Mexican marigolds and Chinese lanterns hung together from the trees, a visual representation of the cultural blending that the dress had always symbolized. Michael had insisted on incorporating both traditions into our ceremony after learning the full story of the dress and what it represented. As I waited in the bridal suite, surrounded by the 3 women who had made this moment possible, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Mom was adjusting my veil with steady hands, no longer the fearful woman who had thrown away the dress just weeks ago. Mrs. Chen was making final touches to the silk flower bouquet, her eyes bright with joy at seeing her decades of secret work finally revealed. and Su Ming sat in a place of honor, watching everything with the satisfaction of someone who had kept a promise across 7 decades. "Are you ready, Mija?" Mom asked, using Grandma Rose's endearment for the first time I could remember. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The music began, and I could hear the guests rising to their feet. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Michael waiting at the altar, his face already emotional as he spotted the small group of elderly women who had come to witness this moment. Mrs. Chen had told him their story the night before at the rehearsal dinner, and he had been moved to tears learning about the community of love that had surrounded my grandmother's life. "Before you go," Su Ming said, standing carefully with her walker, "there is one more thing your grandmother wanted you to know." She reached into her small purse and pulled out what looked like a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "This is the original sketch Rose drew of her wedding dress design in 1952. She kept it all these years, and she wanted you to have it on your wedding day." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. There was the dress, drawn in my grandmother's careful hand, but at the bottom of the page were words I'd never seen before. "For the granddaughter I will love before I meet her, who will carry this dress into a future I can only dream of. May she know that love is the thread that connects all generations." "She knew," I whispered. "Even then, she knew this dress would someday be mine." "Your grandmother believed that some things are meant to travel through time, carrying love from one generation to the next," Mrs. Chen said. "That dress has been waiting 70 years for this moment." The wedding coordinator appeared in the doorway. "Emma, it's time." I hugged each woman, my mother, who had learned to choose hope over fear, Mrs. Chen, who had kept faith across decades, and Su Ming, who had taught my family that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Then I picked up my bouquet of silk flowers that had been lovingly crafted by hands that remembered my grandmother's stories, and I walked toward the future I had chosen. The ceremony aisle stretched before me like a pathway between my family's complicated past and my hopeful future. As I began to walk, I felt the weight of the dress, the history it carried, the love that had been sewn into every stitch. But I also felt its lightness, the way it moved with me, the way it seemed to whisper encouragement with every step. Halfway down the aisle, I caught sight of someone unexpected in the third row. A man in his 60s with graying hair and kind eyes, sitting beside a woman who could only be his wife. He was crying as he watched me approach, and suddenly I knew who he was. David Morales, Uncle Dave, the man who had loved me as a child and whose leaving had shaped so many of my mother's fears. I glanced back at Mom, who was walking behind me, and saw her nod with tears in her eyes. She had invited him. After keeping his memory buried for 25 years, she had found the courage to reach out and invite him to witness the happiness he had helped plant in my childhood. When I reached the altar, Michael took my hands and whispered, "You look like a fairy tale princess, but better. You look real." The ceremony was everything I had dreamed of and more. We included readings in both Spanish and English, honoring the cultural traditions that had shaped the dress. Mrs. Chen read a blessing in Chinese, her voice carrying across the garden like music. Su Ming, despite her age, stood to offer a toast about the patience of love and the courage required to trust in happy endings. When Michael and I exchanged vows, I spoke about choosing love over fear, about building a marriage strong enough to weather complexity and honest enough to face difficult truths. He promised to honor not just me, but the generations of women who had loved me into existence, who had taught me that the most beautiful things often come from the hardest experiences. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced, and as Michael lifted my veil and kissed me, I felt the presence of every woman who had contributed to this moment. Grandma Rose, who had dreamed of this day, Mrs. Chen, who had preserved the dream, Su Ming, who had helped it come true, and my mother, who had finally learned to trust in the power of love over the safety of here. The reception was a celebration unlike any I could have imagined. 3 generations danced together under the desert stars. Mom spent an hour talking with David, finally able to remember their love story without being consumed by its ending.
Mrs. Chen and Su Ming regaled guests with stories of Grandma Rose that I'd never heard, painting a picture of a woman more complex and beautiful than I'd ever known. Late in the evening, as Michael and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Su Ming approached me one final time. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, pressing something small into my hand. "Not just of your wedding, but of your courage to learn the whole truth and still choose love." I looked down to see a small seed pearl, one that had been saved from the original dress repairs. "Plant this," she said with a wink. "Some traditions say that pearls planted in garden soil will grow into trees of wisdom." As Michael and I drove away from the reception, I fingered the pearl in my hand and thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 weeks ago, I had believed I'd lost the most precious thing my grandmother had left me. Instead, I had discovered a treasure trove of family history, hidden friendships, and hard-won wisdom about the nature of love itself. The dress that had been thrown away had become the foundation for healing 3 generations of family pain. The secrets that had been kept to protect me had instead taught me that love is strong enough to survive truth, that families can be more beautiful for their complications, and that sometimes the things we think will destroy us actually save us. As we pulled into our new apartment complex, I caught sight of myself in the car's side mirror. I was still wearing the tiara Su Ming had made, and in the moonlight, the pearls caught the light like stars. I looked like a bride from a fairy tale, but I felt like something better. A woman who had learned that real love stories are messier and more complicated and infinitely more beautiful than any fairy tale could ever be. The dress hanging in my closet would eventually be passed down to my own daughter, along with the stories of the women who had loved it before her. But more than the dress itself, I would pass down the lesson it had taught me, that the most precious things in life are often the ones that survive being broken, being thrown away, being forgotten, and being found again by people who understand their true value. Love isn't perfect. Families aren't simple. Marriage isn't easy. But all of these things are worth fighting for, worth preserving, worth mending with care when they break. The dress had taught me that. And tomorrow, I would begin teaching it to the next generation.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.